My son Ethan has always attracted the most unusual friends. I'm not sure why, but even in his early years, he gravitated toward children others might label the weird ones. I have countless stories about this, but one stands out like a splinter. He was in 4th grade, and we just moved due to my husband's job reassignment. Ethan was new to his school. He'd always been outgoing, so my husband and I weren't worried about him making friends. The transition went smoothly, and everything seemed fine at school. I was thrilled when I first met his classmates' parents. They all seemed upstanding and kind. A few months after the move, the school called midday, requesting a parent discuss an incident involving Ethan and another student. My husband was working, so I agreed to meet the principal. After picking up Ethan, I felt equal parts anger and confusion. Anger because I assumed he'd been in a fight and might need punishment, but confusion because aggression was wildly out of character for him. Ethan refused to speak as we walked to the principal's office, which was unusual. He's normally talkative, even an oversharer. His silence unnerved me, but I assumed he was scared or embarrassed. The principal had him wait outside while I sat across from his desk. He asked typical questions. How's Ethan's behavior at home? Is he respectful? I praised him truthfully. Ethan was well behaved, no exaggeration. Finally, the principal explained, after recess, Ethan allegedly struck a classmate, Lucas, with an eraser, causing him to fall and scream. I was shocked. Ethan spoke fondly of Lucas. They'd seemed close. The principal admitted no one witnessed it, but both boys confirmed details. He clarified Ethan wasn't in trouble. Minor fights weren't uncommon. Relieved, I left, but Ethan stayed silent even on the drive home. At bedtime, frustrated, I pressed him. He finally confessed. Lucas had tricked him. They'd been play-fighting Street Fighter, and Lucas demanded Ethan pretend to attack him, threatening harm if he refused. Teachers assumed it was real. I was furious. My son had been manipulated. I called Lucas's mother, Clara, that night. She sounded disarmingly sweet, admitting Lucas had quirks and had already been punished. Oddly, Lucas confessed the truth unprompted. Clara mentioned he sometimes acted like another person and suggested a sleepover to mend their friendship. Hesitant but hopeful, I agreed. That weekend, I dropped Ethan at Clara's. The boys played in the basement while Clara and I shared wine upstairs. She seemed genuine, even mentioning Lucas had seen specialists for possible dissociative tendencies but was improving. Reassured, I stayed for hours before saying goodbye. The next morning, Ethan waited by the door, smiling. But in the car, he erupted into tears. He described waking to whispers. Lucas stood in the bathroom, candlelight flickering, talking to the mirror as Mr. Jim. Later, Lucas loomed over him, muttering gibberish. Ethan froze, terrified, until morning. Horrified, I called Clara. She laughed it off initially, then admitted Lucas's issues were severe. A psychiatrist suspected dissociative identity disorder. They'd moved twice after school expulsions. I hung up, torn between secrecy and reporting danger. I never decided. That Monday, Lucas attacked another student and was expelled. Clara's number disconnected. Days later, I drove to their house. It was vacant, no trace left. Searches yielded nothing. They'd vanished. Ethan moved on, mostly forgetting. I haven't. I still wonder what happened that night, and what Lucas became.
Today I wasn't very social in college. I didn't get good grades. I wasn't in a frat. I didn't have a girlfriend, and I wasn't very involved in anything. I wasn't a very happy kid. I'm not complaining, though I found a loyal girl who would never stop fighting for me in my late 30s. My life is good now. We live together with 2 cats named Blue and Ras, and I'm planning on proposing soon. Like I was saying, though I wasn't in a frat, so generic frat parties were kind of off the table for me. I still wanted to have fun, though. I mean, who wouldn't, my friends? Brian and Ian were in the same boat. We spent most weekends killing time in Bryson's dorm. That being said, we took every chance we got when it came to parties. Most of the parties we were lucky enough to go to were off campus, meaning they weren't associated with any of the frats or the school itself. One time we actually drove over an hour just to go to a party. It's safe to say we were pretty desperate. Friday afternoon, Ian texted the group chat saying the girl he was talking to knew of a party not that far away. I intended to attract the strangest girls. I'm sure you know the ones I'm talking about. Bryson joked that he didn't want to go to some death metal emo anime party, which I kind of agreed with. Ian was pretty adamant though and convinced us that this would be a normal party. It's not like we had anything better going on. Bryson convinced his brother Chris to be our designated driver. Chris didn't drink anyway and said he'd be down for a party, so everything was looking good. As we were driving to the party, Ian started complaining about the girl he was talking to. He said she hadn't answered him in hours, which honestly wasn't too surprising considering the kind of guy Ian was. He was actually pretty torn, and said he was having second thoughts about even going, which seemed like an overreaction. We were already 30 minutes deep, so we weren't just going to go turn around and go home. We told him to suck it up and not let it ruin the night. After a few more minutes, Ian said Callista's profile disappeared from his phone altogether. We broke it to him that he had been blocked and she probably decided to go to the party with someone else. He pouted for the rest of the drive. When we reached the party, we instantly knew we'd made the right choice. The house was massive, especially compared to the rest of the houses on the block. Ian didn't want to go in just yet, saying he needed a buzz to take his mind off the situation. Bryson and I didn't object to drinking, so we told Chris to park a little further down the street so we could pre-game outside the car. We killed a few of the beers we had brought with us and watched as people entered the house and drove. It honestly looked like a pretty lit party. Once Ian was satisfied with his buzz, the four of us started making our way over to the house. As soon as we stepped inside, I could tell something was off. For starters, all the lights were on, like there was no ambient lighting throughout the entire house, just the bright overhead lights that you'd expect to be off at a college party. Most of the people there were very nicely dressed, not what you'd expect people to wear at a rowdy party. The scene looked more like a fancy dinner party than anything else, but maybe that's what it was after all. We didn't really have any details about what we were walking into. We didn't look too out of place, but the clothing differences were definitely noticeable. The music was also bizarre. They weren't playing trap or hip-hop or any of the usual party music. Instead, they were playing some kind of ethereal, almost druggy music. I'm not really sure what genre it was or how to describe it, but none of the songs had any words, just instruments. I guess it wasn't bad per se, but it was odd. My friends and I looked at each other trying to make sense of what was going on. We drilled Ian for details, but he said he was just as clueless as we were. The four of us walked around a little, exploring the house. There was alcohol everywhere, so we helped ourselves a few minutes and I started noticing people catching my eye and then immediately looking away. It was actually so apparent that I started wondering if there was something in my teeth. I figured I was just getting looks because of what I was wearing, which did make sense to me at the time. The four of us were honestly having a good time, despite the weird atmosphere. Actually, I take that back. Chris was pretty bored and said he was going to go smoke in his car. We figured it was because he didn't have a drop of alcohol on him. A few minutes after he left, a group of girls approached us. We definitely weren't super confident, so getting approached was a new thing. The three of them started flirting with us almost immediately, like it wasn't even subtle. They joked about an entrance fee, which I thought was funny until I saw that they were being serious. They were holding a bottle of tequila, which we definitely weren't going to turn down. Without much thought and not wanting to appear uncool, we swigged the bottle. After that point, the six of us stuck together, drinking, talking, and occasionally dancing. It was going really well. At one point, I noticed a weird mark on Tina's neck. It was a short but solid green line that looked like it had been drawn on and sharply. The line was pretty thin, and I probably wouldn't have noticed it had I not been standing so close to her. I debated asking her about it, but decided against it to avoid potentially offending her. It might have been a birthmark or something like that. Once I had seen it though, I couldn't unsee it. It just looked so unnatural and green. Of all Colors who wears green makeup. It couldn't have been a makeup smear. I decided to let it go and continued flirting with her, wondering where things would end up. Eventually, I saw Bryson and the girl he was with begin to wander off upstairs, which I was happy about. Pretty soon afterwards, I noticed Ian and his girl also walking towards the stairs. I was nervous to ask Tina anything suggestive, because I didn't want to mess anything up. Despite the alcohol, I could feel myself getting really anxious and sweaty, so I told Tina I was going to the bathroom and that I'd be right back. The only bathroom I could find was occupied, so I stood outside the door and waited. Eventually the door opened, and a really tall, older-looking guy wearing a white button-down and linen pants stepped out. I rushed into the bathroom, and he bumped into me. I turned around and kind of expected him to apologize, but he just stood there staring at me. It was the strangest thing. He just stood there with this blank look, sizing me up. I was about to say something when I noticed what was on his neck, the same green line I had seen on Tina. It was literally identical against my better judgment. I asked him what his problem was. He smirked and shook his head before saying, "Who invited you?" Not knowing how to answer that, I blurted out, "Callista, the girl that had stood up." Ian chuckled and looked up like he knew who I was talking about. He looked back at me. His smile is completely gone now. In a low voice, he repeated her name before gesturing around the party. "Do you see Callista here?" I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just slammed the door in his face, wondering what the hell had just happened. I couldn't get over what he said or that green mark on his neck. Part of me regretted not asking him more questions about what the hell was going on. I left the bathroom looking for him. I walked past more people that eyed me up like I didn't belong. I didn't care though. I was going to find my friends and drag them out of here while wandering around the party. I couldn't stop thinking about that green mark. I started looking closely at people's necks, trying to see if anyone else had a mark on their neck, and to my horror, I actually saw 2 more people with the green lines on their necks. They were all the same color, same length, same thickness, same everything. It was freaky. I kept looking for that guy all the while analyzing people's necks. Most people weren't marked up, but I kept catching glimpses of green lines on various people's necks. I was starting to freak out, so I made my way to the stairs looking for my friends. Thankfully, as I was walking up the stairs, Bryson and Ian were walking down. I urged the 2 of them to follow me, and I brought them to an empty hallway so we could talk. I briefly told them about my theory and said we had to leave immediately. They burst out laughing and told me I was just drunk. Bryson told me I was just jealous because they had hooked up and I didn't. I asked him where his girl had gone, and he told me she had instructed him to meet back upstairs in 20 minutes. Ian said his girl told him the same thing. There was no reasoning with these 2, they were riding the high of a hookup. I told them to follow me and that I'd prove that people had strange marks on their necks, but they weren't budging. Just when I was about to give up, Ian turned to the side. What I saw was actually horrifying. There was a thin line on his neck, only this one was red, not green. I practically screamed at him, which actually got them to listen to me. Then inspected Bryson's neck and there was a red mark on his too. Ian told me to relax and that it was probably just a makeup stain, but Bryson started to believe me. I told them we were leaving, and Bryson and I turned to find the door. Ian still wouldn't leave, saying he wanted to meet back up with the girl. Just then a random guy walked past us, eyeing each of us up separately. He didn't say anything but paused long enough for us to notice the green line on his deck. That was it. Bryson and I rushed for the door with Ian closed behind. It felt like everyone there was staring at us as we left, but no one moved to stop us. We ran to Chris's car and told him to drive. As we were leaving, both Ian and Bryson's phones started blowing up. Those girls were asking why we had left. How could they have even known that they weren't even around to see us leave? My friends blocked the girls. Everyone I tell this story to has their own crazy theory about what happened that night. I really don't know what to think about it, but I don't think I want to know what might have happened had that guy not tipped me. It wasn't the job I had planned on, but it paid the bills while I was finishing my degree. Plus, how scary could a school be at night, right? It was a Thursday. I remember that clearly, because the cleaning crew had just left early for the weekend. I had the whole building to myself. The school was old, built in the 60s, and had this eerie, abandoned feel once the students were gone. Long, empty hallways, lockers that creaked open when you passed by, typical stuff for an old building. That night, I was sitting in the security office, scrolling through my phone to pass the time, when the faintest echo reached my ears. It sounded like footsteps. Slow. Methodical. Coming from the direction of the gymnasium. At first, I brushed it off. Kids sometimes stuck around after hours, sneaking in to shoot hoops or hang out. I grabbed my flashlight and walked down the hall toward the gym. But the closer I got, the quieter the footsteps became, almost as if they were matching my own pace. By the time I reached the gym doors, everything was dead silent. I pushed the door open, letting my flashlight cut through the darkness. The gym was empty. I was about to turn around when I heard it again, this time behind me. Quick, shuffling footsteps, like someone running down the hall. I turned, but all I saw was the empty corridor stretching back into the darkness. No one. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was the old building settling. I went back to my post. The school's cameras showed nothing, just empty rooms and dark hallways. But that's when things got weird. Around midnight, the lights in one of the classrooms on the far side of the building flickered on. I didn't think much of it at first, those old lights tended to glitch. But when I checked the security monitor, I noticed something off. The camera feed from that room showed the desks had been rearranged. They'd been set in a circle. And one chair was pulled out, like someone had been sitting there. My heart started racing a little. I hadn't seen anyone enter that room, and I had the only key to the doors. I decided to investigate, because what else was I supposed to do? When I got to the classroom, everything was as I had seen it on the feed. Desks in a circle, chair pulled out. But the strange thing was, the air in that room felt heavy. Like the atmosphere was thick with something. Not fear, exactly, but an overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone. I was about to leave when I heard it again, footsteps, this time coming from above me. The school didn't have an attic, just a crawlspace where the heating ducts ran. The sound was slow, deliberate, like someone was pacing directly above the ceiling tiles. I left the room in a hurry, not wanting to find out who, or what, was up there. I went straight to the office, planning to call the police, but before I could even dial, the phone rang. The caller ID said it was coming from inside the school. I picked up, and all I heard was breathing. Slow, shallow breathing. Then a voice, barely above a whisper, said,
"We're still here."
I dropped the phone and ran. That was my last night working security at that school. I still don't know what was happening in that building, but I've heard rumors from other staff. They say the old gym teacher used to host strange, after-hours meetings with students. Nothing ever proven, but after that night, I'm not sure I want to know. Some places, they hold on to things. Things that don't show up on security cameras. Things that you can only feel when you're alone in the dark.